So anytime I bring up any issues in the Marvel Rivals community, a lot of people are in the comments and they say, roll Q would easily fix a lot of these problems. But I don't think that it will. Let's talk about it. YouTube, what's going on, man? It's Father Dark. Hope everybody's having a great start to their week. If not, I'm sorry to hear that. Let's go ahead and get into the video. So, like I said, lately I've been going on and back and forth talking about how I've kind of been burnt out on Rivals. And, I spent like pretty much the whole week, last weekend and stuff like that, playing different games, Battlefield 6, Apex, just jumping around, kind of trying to just, try some different things and stuff like that, get my love back for actually gaming and stuff. I think after you just play a game for so long, almost a year pretty much at this point, you just get burnt out mentally. I think that's normal for anybody, but I still enjoy Rivals. I'm still going to keep making Rivals content for a lot of you all. I know that's what you like, but I probably will every now and again branch out and play something else. But point that I'm trying to make here is that pretty much any time that I've brought up stuff, and lately it's been more like the just the influx of DPS players in the game, and just how people are so hell-bent on instantly locking DPS in and having a hard time swapping and stuff like that. So many people in the comments, I'd say literally every like fifth comment is somebody saying the same thing, where they say, oh, well, roll Q would fix all these issues. And I think the problem is that a lot of people tend to look at certain things and they go, well, this is the thing that's not happening. And if this thing did happen, then that would just solve everything. That's not really how life works. A lot of times when you just kind of do the inverse of something, you see that it's not always a situation where the grass is greener on the other side kind of deal. People like to use Overwatch as an example, and they'll say, well, you have roll Q there, and that fixed a lot of stuff. And the thing is that one of the problems with Overwatch back when I did play it, now I can't speak to it now simply because I don't play Overwatch, and I didn't really play it as much back when it was, a thing years ago and stuff like that. And I think when I did play it, it was probably like at its lowest in regards to, the player base and stuff like that and its popularity. Nonetheless, though, I talk about it a lot, how I spent probably more time in the little practice range area that they put you in prior to a match, waiting for a match to start up. And with me, I actually would pick flex because I didn't really care. So I just felt like that was the better thing to do, and it would probably make the time shorter. But it was also a situation where when I did play, I would always play with family members and stuff like that, and friends that had wanted me to play. I never played it alone. So, I'm sure that kind of factored in as far as the wait time and stuff. But yeah, I would spend sometimes upwards of like 15, 20 minutes waiting for a match. And by the time you get into the match, it's like you spend more time in the waiting area than you did actually playing the match. And the other issue that I have with it too is that one of the things that I like about Marvel Rivals is that freedom that you have to be able to make a bunch of different comps and swap things up. And the thing is that it doesn't really fix anything. You're basically treating like the symptom instead of actually like curing anything when you bring in roll Q, right? People are still going to be like, oh, okay, well, this is just an excuse for me to be able to just play, whatever role it is that I want, primarily DPS, which is, seems to be the problem. And a lot of these people, they say that they flex, but clearly, like when you play, it's just a situation where you see that that's just not the case. There's far more people that don't flex than people that do. Like I said, with me personally, what I've started doing lately is just Instalocking DPS. And so many games I load into where there may be 5, maybe even the whole team, 6 people have Instalock DPS. And I pretty much just turn my brain off to where I don't worry about it anymore and I don't care about it. And eventually, you know what happens? People swap and magically we get a tank, we get 2 supports, and it works itself out. But saying that roll Q is actually going to fix anything, like I said, I don't think that that's actually fixing anything. I think it's just that people are willing to take more time to get into a match versus being able to actually deal with the issue of the community just not wanting to be considerate and mindful of other people and stuff like that and do things that they don't want to. I think that the approach that a lot of people are taking now, whether it's from people that have listened to my videos or whether it's just people that have come to this conclusion on their own, simply because a lot of you are intelligent enough to do stuff like that, to where it's like, hey, you know what? I have to always play tank or play support or mostly support, mostly tank, whatever. I'm going to just start instalocking DPS and let other people figure it out. And most of the people that I hear that do that, people are starting to figure it out. And they're just saying, hey, I'm going to play this other role. And there is going to be an adaptation period where people, you're going to get these supports that have never played support. They've just sat back and said, oh, well, that's the easiest role. That's for babies. That's for, all these other people that aren't good at the game, etc. Only for them to see that support is not an easy role. You're literally the primary focus of the enemy team. And it seems like every season they just add more and more characters, obviously, that just make support's life a living hell. Not to mention the DPS complain about supports and say, oh, well, they're too overpowered. Brother, these supports are people that have had to day in and day out deal with constantly getting dove and nobody peeling for them and stuff like that. So they've had to learn to survive and how to deal with these things on their own. God forbid they actually get another support that helps them out, or tanks that peel, DPS that peel and stuff like that, and actually help them out. Of course your life is going to be miserable, but the thing is that you're picking a role where you're trying to make someone else's life miserable, and now you're mad that these people are fighting back. To me, that's kind of like a bully mindset in a sense, and I get that that's how the game is supposed to be played, but at the same time though, like I said, a lot of these people have just assumed that these roles are just so easy, and then when they're forced to do them, they start to realize like, oh man, this isn't as easy as I thought. And as someone who's flexed since the game has came out, I just have to be honest, and it's not me being funny or anything, but playing DPS has felt far more relaxing and easier than playing any of the other roles. Playing tank, there's so much stuff that you have to worry about. You're literally like the one that's like leading the charge and having to create the space and take all the chances and stuff like that, make all the plays. As a support, like I said, you're constantly having to make sure that everything that you do is done perfectly. You're having to make sure that you stay alive, that you're dealing with all these things, paying attention for the Spider-Man, the Black Panthers and stuff like that, helping your other supports out, being able to evenly distribute the heals out and stuff, knowing exactly when to ult, how to ult, deal with people that are trying to counter you while you're ulting and stuff like that. So there's so many different things you have to worry about. Whereas as a DPS, I just chill. I'm sitting here lording out Iron Man, and I'm just having the time of my life, just chilling. Whenever I need heals, I just fly down low, get some heals. Maybe I ping them or whatever. If anything goes wrong, I don't do the GG no heals, but I mean, that's pretty much what's been being done this whole entire time, right? And like I said, with role queue, I just feel like it's going to just do nothing but make the player base, not even make them lazier, but basically just keep them where they already were and make them feel more comfortable saying like, oh, I can just insta-lock DPS now. You're still going to have like 85% of the base that just wants to play DPS and doesn't want to play anything else. And the other issue that I have with that too is that once you get into a position to where, let's say that you get like a bad support on your team, right? Somebody who's just not as good. Now you have the ability to say, hey, you know what? You're not playing support the way that you should, or maybe you don't know how to play the proper support for this comp that we're going against, whatever the case is. Let me swap with you really quick. And there's been so many times where I've done that, where it's made a massive change. Just one person just swapping with someone and taking the role who knows how to play it has made a massive difference. Same thing with tank. Sometimes you get someone who's like, oh, well, I've seen a bunch of people say Emma's broken and she's really good, so I'm just going to pick Emma. And then they have no idea what to do with Emma. And then if you swap, you're like, hey, I'm actually a Lord Emma, I'm just playing this other role or whatever the case is. Then you can actually, do what needs to be done and make a massive difference. And this has happened plenty of times. And then the thing is too, is that sometimes I think that a lot of people from playing games like Overwatch and other hero shooters and stuff, where they are more strict with the 2-2-2 thing, meaning like 2 tanks, 2 DPS, 2 supports. So many people have become kind of like brainwashed with that to think that that's the only way that you can play. But there's been so many times where we had the 2-2-2 comp and everyone was doing what they were supposed to, but maybe the other team just had 1 tank, 3 DPS and 2 supports or something, and that worked out. We've seen like triple support and stuff, and I know a lot of people have an issue with it, but I think that the people that really have an issue with triple support are people that don't want to play support. Sometimes like that's how games work. They have metas and stuff, and you have to be able to adapt, especially live service games, because they're constantly changing things. If they're not changing stuff, people are going to get bored. If Bucky is just the most broken character in the game for the longest time and they don't ever nerf him or balance him out or anything like that, people are going to get bored with that and move on to something else. It's same thing with the support. If there's a support that's just slightly better than all the other ones and doesn't get nerfed or buffed or has changes, just anything, the team ups and stuff like that, things that keep the game fresh and inject life and stuff into them. If you don't have these things, people will get bored. And I think a lot of people just struggle actually thinking about it from an unbiased standpoint. If they have a role that they like, they're always going to want that thing to be as good as possible. If you play support all the time and you like Luna, you're not going to have an issue with the fact that Luna has just been, the favorite child of the developers this whole entire time. If you play DPS and let's say you play Psylocke and they make any changes to Psylocke, you're going to complain about that and go, oh, well, why do they do this? They've killed Psylocke. Brother, there's like 30 other DPS in the game. Try a different one. And I think too, there's just a lot of people that just don't like change. They do like it, but then they don't like to admit that they like it, or they actually just may not really like it and would prefer things to just stay the same all the time. And like I said, it's just sometimes you got to step away and kind of look at it from an unbiased standpoint. But me personally, though, I don't think that role queue is actually going to solve anything. I think there's just too many people that just rely on that. It's the same thing with like matchmaking. I know it's a different situation, but it's just kind of like overall the point that I'm making is that even with matchmaking, people will look at like EOMM and they'll say, oh, well, that's not the way to do it. And then there are people that'll say, oh, well, we need skill-based matchmaking. But in any game where there is skill-based matchmaking, people do nothing but complain about that because they both have these trade-offs. And that's why things shouldn't be like polar opposites. It shouldn't be like completely left or completely right. You should kind of like be able to find some type of middle ground with stuff. Like the Goldilocks levels, right? Versus it just being like this thing where, like I said, it's completely left or it's completely right. Because that usually just is not ever going to really be what it is that you actually want. I know this is like the third time that I've talked about this, but it's just a situation where, like I said, pretty much any time that I say, well, like there's this issue, people just go, oh, well, roll kill fix that. And it's like, no, it's not going to change anything. Like I said, you're still going to have a whole bunch of people that play DPS that are going to sit here and load into the game and go, oh, well, now I have an excuse to only play DPS and I don't ever have to learn anything else. And that's really the biggest issue. And I don't know really like what the fix is for it, to be honest with you. But I am aware, though, that just saying like, oh, well, if we just go to this thing that's the complete opposite of it, that'll fix everything. Like I said, that's one of the things that I do like about this game is that you do have the option in the middle of a match to switch things up. If someone wants to run 3 tanks and 3 supports, and maybe that's just what works against that comp for that period of time, that's what works. But I also know that I don't like when basically games don't really change. You look at like when I used to play COD, sometimes every now and again, the devs would kind of get lazy and they would just make like the M4 assault rifle meta and they would just leave it that way for 3 months. You know what happened? People got bored. People didn't like that. They didn't want it. People had way more fun in the game when the metas changed up weekly, bi-weekly, but like still it was like a regular shift to where this thing wasn't meta for too long and people were constantly having to adapt and learn new things and stuff like that. And I think that's what attracts people to live service games is that they don't just stay the same forever. And it's not the situation where every single time you load in you're going to have the same exact thing be dominating the battlefield and stuff. So it's just something to think about. Like I said, this is an echo chamber. I love to hear what you guys think. I know that a lot of people feel very passionately about it. There's some people that they get really triggered whenever you bring up roll queue in this game, and they'll always say the same thing. They go, oh, go back to Overwatch or whatever. And it's like, brother, I didn't play Overwatch to begin with. Not that I agree with it, but it's still just like I didn't play it to begin with. And there's a lot of people who probably play this game that didn't play Overwatch to begin with. But like I said, though, still, I still like to hear you guys' opinions. I know it's kind of like a split thing where half the community feels like roll queue would solve everything. Half the community feels like that's not, what this game should be. And even still, like I said, with Overwatch, I didn't even know this. When I started playing Overwatch, they already had roll queue, but at one point in time, they didn't have roll queue. And like I said, I think that it's just a situation where it's kind of like the easy solution is to say, okay, well, people don't want to do this or they don't want to learn this. Well, how about we just add this thing in that kind of forces you to have a certain type of comp or whatever the case is. But with me personally, though, I like freedom. I like the choice to be able to swap and do the things that I want to do, play how I want to play, have the kind of team composition that I want to have depending upon what the situation is. And I think it's something that for me makes me come back to the game overall is the fact that every match is different. And I constantly am being forced to learn different things, learn new roles, learn new characters, et cetera, et cetera. So, but nonetheless, though, that's all I got for this video. I'm going to wrap it up. Just let me know in the comments what you guys think about it, how you feel about it. Like I said, I love to hear from everybody and what their opinions are, even if it's different from my own. I don't know everything, just the way that I think, but there's a lot of you out there that are far more intelligent than myself and know far more about games like this than I do. So it's always welcome whenever you guys throw your opinions and stuff out there. But like I said, I'm going to wrap it up, though. Father Dark, I'll catch you guys on the next one.